Okay, my good people, excuse me. Welcome back to the channel once more. Right, today we've got a continuation of my Hugo project. Just for those unaware, very briefly, I'll explain. Back in the 60s, 70s, early 80s, I used to read a lot of science fiction, but much of it short stories. So I thought I would redress the balance, now I'm back into it, by reading some novels. And I chose the Hugo award-winning novels to do that. So that's a brief potted history of how this particular series came about. Now, I had taken a little break from this because I became a bit burned out, quite honestly, from reading some of the contemporary novels, which run to many pages, more than I'm used to anyway. But I got back on the horse a week and a half or so ago and managed to read two novels. I've retreated back to my comfort zone, so I've gone back to the familiar vintage era for these, and they're both classic novels, so I'll kick off. The first one is Rendezvous with Roma by Arthur C. Clarke. Actually, this is a very nice edition. It's first American paperback, and it's got this nice little second cover of Roma itself, spaceship, and then it's got this little cutout showing you a part of it. Okay, this is fairly straightforward. A huge dumb object as they call them these days, arrives in the solar system. And after a lot of jaw from committees, blah, blah, they decided to send up a ship to investigate. And when they got there, what they found was this huge vessel. It was cylindrical shaped, with some weird features like a cylindrical sea, actual buildings as well. And they couldn't find anybody on it, no aliens, just machines. And that's basically all there is to it. I mean, something happens towards the end of the story, which I'm not going to tell you about because, I hate spoilers if any of you are going to read this. I don't want to spoil it for you. But something happens that makes it rather more interesting towards the end as well. Okay, so, I mean, that's the basic plot without going into any details. It reminded me very much of Ringworld by Larry Niven that I talked about in one of my earlier videos on the Hugos. Yeah, I mean, I've got a bit of a history with this book actually, because I've tried to read it twice before. I don't know whether it was because I was reading different kind of stuff at the time, but I found it a little bit tedious, quite frankly. And I got about a third of the way through, I think, maybe both times, and just packed it in. Now, of course, this project I'm doing gave me a perfect chance to get it read finally. I'm glad I did, because I actually stopped it at the wrong time, because the second and thirds of the novel, sorry, I got a bit mixed up there, were quite interesting. Now, I admire Arthur C. Clarke for many things. His scientific knowledge, his scientific achievements, his place in the pantheon of great SF writers, but his prose, his dynamic and electrifying prose, is not one of them, quite frankly. He's no Alfred Bester, let's put it that way. But this book, it has a fairly sedate pace. It's more interested with the science of Roma, which is huge. I mean, it's absolutely huge, and it's only in the solar system. They work out for a certain amount of time, so they've got a limited time to explore it. And the only criticisms I would have is that the characters are not developed very well, because he's more concentrating on Roma itself, and also there are no female characters to speak of, and I mean this wasn't unusual for the time. This actually won the Hugo Award in 1974, so women weren't at the forefront around about that time. It was the first of two Hugos that Arthur Clarke won, and I found it interesting without being sort of enthralling. Although the last quarter of the book does get quite exciting, actually, quite a page turner when this thing happens that I can't tell you about. So yeah, I mean, I was reasonably impressed with this. I was a bit crafty, and I started it a third of the way through, because I didn't want to go through all the boring bit the bit that I found boring twice before. But it didn't affect the book in any way, because it was all jaw and committees deciding this and blah blah. So I didn't really miss anything. But yeah, I was glad I finished it. And I would say it was a worthy winner of the Hugo. On my usual scale of 1 to 10 with 5 as average, I would give it a solid 8. Reasonably impressed, shall we say. Okay, now the other book I read was Starship Troopers, Robert Heinlein. I've been meaning to read this for a long time, and I say finally the Hugo project convinced me that I should. This is a first. I think it's a first printing of the British edition. Well, it's a new edition. Actually, it is. It's actually a reprint. But there's been many printings of this. Now this is also fairly straightforward. It won, by the way, it won the Hugo in 1960, and it was the first of 4 Hugos that Heinlein picked up. He did have 2 before this, but they were in the retro Hugos, which are not really counted in the Hugo Awards. But this was his first Hugo, proper Hugo. It concerns soldiers of the future. Follows a character called Johnny Rico, who goes through boot camp, then to officer training, and eventually to we get a look at the battles against the bugs. Now, of course, that brings to mind Orson Scott Card's game Ender's Game, which they were battling the buggers. Actually, pardon my French, but I'm not being rude there. They actually called them the buggers in the book. And also, this book influenced Joe Haldeman's Forever War, which I've also covered earlier. Now, I found it a bit of an up and a downer, this one. The first sequence of boot camp description was very entertaining. It was almost as if Heinlein had been there. He might have been. I don't know what his military career was, but it was certainly a great description of what soldiers go through at boot camp, and I found it hugely entertaining. Then we go into officer training, which kind of it sort of cools down a bit for me. because we have Heinlein bringing his opinions on social matters of the time. For instance, he goes on about juvenile delinquency and manages to weave them into the storyline. He goes on about governments, and he weaves that into it. And I don't know. I find that stuff a bit intrusive. Of course, this was a problem with Heinlein. A lot of people had that problem. Is him airing his political views in the book that he was writing or whatever. If you can get past that, it's okay. Then the back end of the book is the actual battle against the bugs, which I don't know. I found a bit boring, to be honest, because there was a lot of technical jargon in there, and it didn't seem to get where it was going very quickly. I was kind of I had two minds about this book, quite frankly. Although it wasn't a bad book, it just wasn't great. Now the one thing I've never understood about this book is why it's generally classified as a juvenile. I would disagree with that personally, but that's what people say. But it's all a matter of opinion at the end of the day. I'm glad I read it, because I'd been wanting to read it for the longest time. They did make a film of this, but which I can't remember if I've seen it or not. I think I might have seen bits of it. I didn't think it was very good if I did. That's really all I can say about the book. There's no sort of one thing that stood out for me. There was no sort of major climax that you might expect. But I'm not giving any spoilers away when I say that. You'll understand that when you read it, if you read it. On a scale of as usual, 1 to 10 with 5 as average, I'd give it maybe 7.5. I know it's generally considered to be one of his better books, but I'm hoping he's done better, because I've got another 2 Hugos to read. I've already done Stranger in a Strange Land, which I wasn't completely enamoured with. I mean, the jury's out for me on Robert Heinlein. I mean, I've read a couple of his short stories, which were excellent. The Roads Must Roll, which is about pavements, that actually move, the people don't have to bother walking, and the problems that entails. And also I've read By His Bootstraps, which is a very good time travel story. But as I say, I'll keep an open mind about Heinlein till I've read his other 2, which I don't have. I'll have to buy them. Yep, okay, folks. So that is my rundown of Rendezvous with Roma and Starship Troopers. I hope you enjoyed that one. I will be back shortly with something different, probably, because I don't have any more books to show you. I think I might try and get out the Switch Shmups video, which I've always been talking about for forever. So anyway, thank you very much for putting up with me again and watching this video, and keep sharing if you can, keep commenting because I like the comments, and thank you for your subscriptions, and I will see you very soon. Bye bye now.